You use GPS to find a restaurant. That is the least important thing it does. Right now, without GPS, the lights could go out, the stock market could freeze, cell towers could desynchronize, and planes would be flying blind. The system was designed as a military navigation tool. It became the invisible clock that holds modern civilization together, and most people have no idea it exists until it stops. The Global Positioning System is a constellation of 31 operational satellites orbiting at roughly 20,000 kilometers altitude, maintained by the U.S. Space Force. Each satellite carries multiple atomic clocks accurate to within nanoseconds. When your phone or any receiver picks up signals from 4 or more satellites simultaneously, it calculates position through geometry. But position is the side effect. The primary output, the one almost nobody thinks about, is time. Here is why that matters. Every cell tower in the country uses GPS timing to synchronize its signals with neighboring towers. Without that synchronization, handoffs between towers fail and calls drop. Every time a trade executes on a major stock exchange, it requires a timestamp accurate to the microsecond for regulatory compliance and for sequencing trades correctly. Even a single millisecond of clock drift can trigger order execution failures, create data inaccuracies, and generate compliance violations, and those timestamps ultimately trace back to GPS. The power grid uses GPS timing to synchronize generators across thousands of miles. Without it, power stations can fall out of phase, triggering cascading failures. The Internet's routing protocols depend on synchronized clocks. The global ATM network depends on synchronized clocks. Aviation depends on GPS for navigation, approach procedures, and collision avoidance. Maritime shipping depends on it for port entry. In 2019, the Commerce Department commissioned RTI International to calculate what GPS had generated for the U.S. private sector. The figure, $1.4 trillion, 90% of it accumulated after 2010, as every industry quietly rewired itself around the assumption that GPS would always be there. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security found that 15 of 18 designated critical infrastructure sectors rely on GPS. Finance, power, telecoms, aviation, maritime, emergency services, agriculture, all of them built their operations on a foundation they collectively decided was too reliable to question. The problems. GPS was designed for peacetime navigation in the 1970s. It was not designed for a world in which state actors routinely jam and spoof it in populated airspace. In 2024, the aviation industry recorded more than 430,000 GPS jamming and spoofing incidents globally. IATA called it a crisis. The incidents were concentrated in two regions, the Eastern Europe-Baltic corridor, where Russian electronic warfare systems have been systematically degrading GPS signals since the start of the Ukraine conflict. Finland alone recorded 2,800 incidents in 2024, compared to 200 the year before, and the Middle East, where researchers from the University of Texas identified an Israeli airbase as the likely source of widespread spoofing affecting civilian aircraft in the region. At one point, more than 1,100 vessels in the Strait of Hormuz area reported GPS interference in a single 24-hour period. By the second quarter of 2025, maritime GPS jamming had grown severe enough that over 13,000 vessels globally reported disruptions, a problem that maritime analysts now describe as a mainstream operational threat rather than an edge case. On the ground, the incidents are no longer abstract. In January 2025, a Ryanair flight approaching Vilnius carried. Lithuania boarded its landing at 850 feet and diverted to Warsaw after GPS interference made the approach unsafe. Lithuania's Air Navigation Authority confirmed the cause was external signal interference, the most likely source being jamming from Russian territory. Carried, Tartu Airport in Estonia suspended commercial operations entirely after GPS degradation made approaches dangerous. IATA's 2025 safety report showed a 67% rise in incidents year over year, and a cumulative increase of 193% compared with 2023. Jamming and spoofing are different threats. Jamming blocks the signal. Receivers lose lock and know they are lost. Spoofing is worse. A spoofer broadcasts false GPS signals, convincing receivers they are somewhere they are not. Aircraft have flown off course. Ships have been navigated into territorial waters. In the financial system, a spoofed timing signal could sequence transactions incorrectly, creating compliance failures and potential market manipulation. These are not hypotheticals. The incidents are being logged daily by aviation safety bodies and maritime authorities. The deeper structural problem is signal physics. The signal reaching Earth from a GPS satellite is roughly as strong as the light from a 60-watt bulb seen from 25,000 kilometers away. A GPS jammer powerful enough to cause disruption costs a few $100s and fits in a backpack. The entire architecture, the most critical timing infrastructure on the planet, rests on a signal that can be overwhelmed by hardware cheaper than a smartphone. And crucially, all other major constellations share the same fundamental vulnerability. Europe's Galileo, Russia's GLONASS, China's Beidou, they all broadcast at low power from high altitude. Multi-constellation receivers reduce dependence on any single system. But they do not resolve the underlying physics. The United Nations has warned explicitly that rising interference incidents now threaten the safety of aviation, maritime navigation, and global telecommunications, and that the trajectory absent intervention is only going to steepen. U.S. Space Force General Michael Guedelin summarized the failure scenario bluntly: without GPS, the entire economy comes to a halt because it cannot move data, people, or goods. Experts modeling a sustained outage estimate the internet could degrade within hours, and the national power grid could fail within a day. Solutions exist and some have been deployed, just not here. Chip-scale atomic clocks can hold accurate timing for hours during a GPS outage, enough to bridge short disruptions to financial and grid systems. ELORAN, carried a modernized terrestrial backup that does not depend on satellites, has been deployed in South Korea and the United Kingdom as a deliberate hedge against exactly this vulnerability. The United States shut down its own LORAN C terrestrial backup network in 2010, a decision made before jamming had become a daily operational reality, and has not replaced it at scale. 31 satellites, 20,000 kilometers up, a signal weaker than a dim light bulb, spreading across a planet that rebuilt its entire financial system, power grid, and communications infrastructure around the assumption it would never fail. That is the single point of failure nobody talks about, because as long as it works, it is invisible.